Music, dance, theater. It's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
Hello, and welcome to On the Aisle with me, Tom Alvarez. Today's guest is Emmy-nominated maestro Matthew Kraemer, a conductor, pianist, and a violinist who leads the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra and the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra in New Orleans. Join me now for a conversation with Matthew. Listening to the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra led by Maestro Matthew Kraemer, performing Handel's Water Music. So I have to tell you that, of course, I wrote a review, and I hope you had a chance to see it. And in that review, I gave it, I extended glowing remarks, but I assure you they were not disingenuous. I would never insult artists with comments that, were in any way my true feelings. And I must say that I was just really, really moved and touched, and I just absolutely loved that program. So why don't you tell our audience about the work?
The Chevalier is a theatrical play that was written by Bill Barkley, who actually, as you know, starred in the production and is responsible as, one of those kind of Charlie Chaplin types, the director, the producer, the writer, the entrepreneur. And it tells the story of Chevalier de Saint-Georges, who was the first, what we regard as the first prominent composer of color, a black composer from France who had a very fascinating life. He was the finest swordsman. He was a military commander. He was a tutor for Marie Antoinette. He knew Mozart. And the play imagines, a scenario where Mozart and Chevalier are together and they're talking, talks about the fight for equal rights in revolutionary France. And it utilizes Chevalier's music from beginning to end. So it really is a play very much incorporated with Chevalier's music in addition to Bill Barkley's narrative. And Bill has written dozens of plays that are produced by orchestras around the country. He's a very gifted playwright, but also a talented actor and a musician. He's a conductor on top of that. So, we utilize the actors in this production out front, the orchestra playing Chevalier's music, and then there was even a projector with images on the screen. So it was really an immersive program. And to do it at the Madam Walker Theater, which is such an important venue here in Indianapolis, was, I think, what really kind of brought everything together.
Well, as a violinist yourself, I presume that you are familiar with the composer's music.
Very much. The violin concertos, which were performed brilliantly by Brendan Elliott, who played the musical version of Chevalier in the production.
He was brilliant.
They're so quirky and they're so unique. They have so much, the technical element, but the musical element is also there. They're wonderful pieces.
Well, I know that, and I learned this in the story, that he was referred to as the Black Mozart, and he really resisted that.
Mm-hmm.
But there were similarities, of course, and I couldn't help but, Matthew, it happened to be that during this whole period of your concert, I also saw a local play version of Amadeus,
Mm-hmm.
and I also something else. Oh, the opera did Figaro.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was an all Mozart month for me, and I love his music. But your production was really the icing on the cake. It really showed your organization off quite well. The musicians and the actors were superb, and just the format, the whole thing, the script, excellent.
I appreciate
And
that very much, Tom. Thank you.
I couldn't help but see the similarity between Amadeus is all imagined,
Mhm.
his relationship with Salieri, and of
Mhm.
course in this one it's Chevalier and Mozart and their imagined conversations, and of course Marie Antoinette,
Mhm.
So yeah, it must have been a lot of fun for everybody too.
It really was. You could see the look on our musicians' faces. They enjoyed the whole process. And again, it is about that collaboration with different art forms. And it's interesting, Tom, that you mentioned the Peter Shaffer play Amadeus, because I've actually done that in Buffalo with Mozart's music in a very similar manner
Really?
to what you saw.
Wow.
I would love to bring that to Indianapolis, but you pare down the Shaffer play, and you have to cut out a lot of the dialogue in order to make it the appropriate length, and then you add in all the music that was in the Milos Forman
Kidding.
film, and it's
Oh, I'd love to
beautiful. It's
see
exactly
that.
the same way. So I'm hoping in the next few seasons we can bring that to
Well,
Indianapolis.
in the play, of course, they did a great job of editing the sound design so that you had to hear Mozart's music, and of course the character, they didn't show his fingers. The actor,
Mhm.
dramatized it quite well that he knew what he was playing, but of course you couldn't see his fingers. But it worked beautifully. But of course, you had to have the music in the play. So for those listening who aren't familiar with the difference between, say, the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra and the Indianapolis Symphony, explain.
Of course. There are only so many full-time symphony orchestras where musicians audition and make their livelihood from. Whether it's a 42-week season or a 56-week season orchestra, no orchestra plays for 56 weeks. They're just paid through 56 weeks. It's there aren't very many of them in the country, but there are a great deal of regional orchestras, we call that, play maybe 12 weeks or 16 weeks of programs, and that's right about where the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra is. We have 7 subscription concerts. We also do parks concerts, education concerts, our annual gala, and then we also perform for the symphonic choir and other organizations. So, but artistically, the difference is very pronounced, because I always say a chamber orchestra is the orchestra of Mozart and Haydn. It's the makeup of what you would have had in the late 18th century or early 19th century. And from Beethoven's era, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. But an interesting thing happened in the 20th century is that so many composers began to come back to the chamber orchestra because of its intimacy. When you have 35 musicians on stage versus 90 or 100 in a Mahler symphony, there's a transparency in the textures, and you can create these incredible colors when every member on the stage is a soloist. So our repertoire is very, very different. It's not to say that the Indianapolis Symphony couldn't play what we're playing, but they would have to pare down the orchestra much smaller in order to play, some of the music that we play that includes just 9 musicians or 12 musicians. So for every program that we have, you'll see a different makeup on stage. Sometimes we have to bring in more musicians for bigger pieces. Other times we scale down. We're very malleable. And I think it's just that intimacy I keep coming back to. You at the Schrott Center for the Arts, you're almost on top of us. If you get any closer, I joke that we'll have to give you a fiddle and you'll have to join the violin section.
Uh-huh.
So there's a real intimacy in that, which I just adore. And everybody's so important. There's nowhere to hide in a chamber orchestra.
Well, that explains why you were drawn to this orchestra, right? The repertoire and just the difference that you just described.
I'm a violinist. Maybe in a former life, I say I still have my violin over there and it's got 4 strings on it, but I don't play as much as I used to. But when
Hmm.
I did, chamber music was my great passion when I was in college. String quartets, trios, piano trios, for example. And it's that same kind of approach for all of us. We're on stage, their musicians are breathing and moving together. I'll notice that, maybe the concertmaster is not even watching me. He's looking at the principal oboe and they're communicating that way. So there's a great deal of musical dialogue that happens in a chamber orchestra.
Yeah, I always was curious about that, and I believe I did ask somebody, a musician one time, an ISO musician, the same question. But yes, musicians do listen to each other. That's an important part of it, right?
Exactly it. When we were always aware of this, but it was most pronounced during COVID. If we go back to that, when we were trying to do
Mm.
concerts with 12 feet of separation and the woodwinds were behind plexiglass, and how incredibly difficult it was to make music with each other at such a distance. Now we had to, and that was the only way we could do concerts, but it was so pronounced that we do rely on the breath to listen to somebody or to watch them physically take a breath for tempo
Mhm.
and for character and all those things. So we have to
And
be close to each other
you
in
know,
order to
Matthew,
really
this
communicate
show is
well.
meant to appeal to, as broad an audience as I can. That's the whole point.
Mhm.
To spotlight the arts and arts organizations, but the art forms themselves. And, I also see it as educational for those who've never attended a symphony concert or a chamber orchestra concert. So there are basic questions I always like to ask. So bear with me, but
Sure.
explain to those listening who wonder why it is that what is it that you do as a conductor? What's the point?
If you were to ask my father, he would tell you that I have the best job in the world. I get to bounce around interpretive dance on the podium while the musicians actually do all the hard work. And there's some truth to that. But, when the orchestras got too big, from Beethoven's era on, it just became easier to have somebody up there to kind of organize things and to keep things together in some respects. But artistically, you have such incredibly talented and educated and trained musicians together that without a conductor, which you can have an orchestra without a conductor, they exist, but there has to be someone or some people that make the musical decisions, how fast or how slow things are going to go, how to fix things in rehearsal. And it takes a lot of time because the musicians are so intently focused on the notes that they have to play and then listening to each other that they might not always hear the big picture. And if you stop and then have, 20 voices all trying to talk at the same time, it can become very chaotic. So the conductor's job in earnest is to study the repertoire and so that you know it inside and out, and to run the rehearsals so that things come together in a cohesive vision. And then you have the concert where everything has been worked through, but hopefully you leave some room, for spontaneity. And so, what we ultimately say is that, the conductor's job is to play the orchestra, to work on balances and intonation issues, to work on character and articulation, and then also to listen to the musicians so that you have the flexibility of changing if you hear something from them that, changes your mind. So we're often referred to in sports terms as like the head coach of a team or
Yeah,
team ready. And there's again some
sure.
truth to all that, but it really is an important job that relies on a lot of black magic. And what I mean by that is there's a psychological element of working with 60, 80 very talented musicians. If you talk too much, they can tune you out. If you don't talk enough, they might not know what it is that you need them to do. If you're, leading them in a way that doesn't inspire them, they might tune you. So there's a lot of things that go on in a
Interesting.
rehearsal.
So it's
And
much more than just waving that baton and keeping the tempo.
I could teach somebody to do that in 10 minutes. The hands part is really not that complicated. And you'll watch some conductors who have really no technique at all. They don't use the baton, they wave their arms around. They don't look particularly clean with their gestures, but they elicit amazing results. So no, the hard part is the stuff that comes between the ears. And that's why I'm grateful that, conductors really hit their strides in their
Mhm.
50s, 60s, 70s. Herbert Bloomstead is still conducting in his late 80s, late 90s rather. He's almost
Mhm.
100. So, I'm not an NFL linebacker. I don't have to retire when I'm 30. Conductors have very long careers if we're lucky.
And tell me this, does it give you a leg up, the fact that you're also a violinist?
I think it helps considerably. That's a very astute comment.
It's like
Uh,
actors who work with directors who are actors themselves.
that's exactly right because,
You've
roughly
been in the
60%.
trenches.
That's it. And roughly 60% of the orchestra are stringed instruments from the violins down to the double basses. So, in order to know how to pull a sound or pull a color out of that string body, it really helps to be a string
Mhm.
player. Although a piano helps considerably too, so you hear harmony
Mhm.
well. And, there are conductors who are percussionists and singers. So, there's no direct route to becoming a conductor, but strings definitely helps.
And there's also and I've only learned this recently. And again, I think it was I interviewed Maestro Markle, of
Mhm.
the ISO, and that was a delightful conversation. I'm sure you've met and you've talked, right?
No, I don't know him personally, actually, but I've enjoyed his concerts. He's very
Oh,
well
wow.
regarded in the international music
Well, I'd like
scene.
to be a fly on the wall if you two ever get together. Maybe I'll have you on together sometime. That would be
Oh, it'd
fun.
be, I would absolutely
Well,
enjoy that. I'm a big fan.
Matthew, he's a musician's musician for sure, like you, probably in that way. And apparently they loved working with him just because of his, just his focus on, the relation. It's important to him that the orchestra, the players, that they have camaraderie and that they are
Mhm.
all, they have a bond. And the music, of course, inspires them. But, the conductor, you set the tone, right?
We really do,
You
and there are
try
lots of
to.
different ways to lead. We try to, as you say, it's so much personality versus the actual music making, which has to be top
Yeah.
notch too. But yes, it is absolutely that psychological element
By the
of bringing
time you
people
get to
together.
the stage, you've had all of that rehearsal that you spoke of.
Mhm.
So you would hope that they're prepared, right? When you
That's right.
sit down. And the other thing that I learned about conducting that I wasn't aware of, I didn't study music. I was in a chorus for 6 years and, the Indianapolis Men's Chorus, and there were a lot of music educators in there. And, these guys would nitpick over every note, but I learned a lot. It was like the master's class, and I actually learned how to read music. But in any case, a good conductor can also, I mean, isn't it your job to, the best you can, interpret the music the way it was written by the composer, stay within his vision, right?
That's absolutely right. Fidelity to the score. If a composer gives you the tempo markings and the dynamics, you're supposed to adhere to that. But it's fascinating. What are there 500 recordings of Beethoven's Fifth out there, and they're all a little bit different. So even if you try to stay to the letter of the law in the score, there's still an infinite number of choices that have to be made. Just like
Sure.
choices that we make in our
Isn't that where your creativity comes in, though, that you can add color and nuances?
That's exactly it. And that's part of the discovery. Every time I come back to the same piece of music I've done 10 times before, there's always a different thing that I change. Oh, I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. So how I interpret music was likely to change too.
How does that happen? I mean, I'm sure there are pieces you've played a million times and there are others. When a new piece comes to you, for instance, how 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 long does it take you to learn that score and to listen? What's your process?
If you're really on top of things, you'll start to work through new music 12 months in advance. Sometimes I don't have that
Mm.
luxury. Sometimes it's 6 months in advance, but it better not be a week in advance. That's for sure. But a lot of times we have a brand new piece, a world premiere, a commission. So you really have to start from scratch. But there you have the luxury of talking to the composer and getting insight from that. But it depends on the complexity. It depends on the duration. This season, I have Mahler's Fifth Symphony, which is almost 70 minutes of music. It's enormous. And so, I've been working through that. It'll be a first time through that for me, but I've done four of his other symphonies. So, I have during the course of my season, almost about 70 concerts that I have coming up for next season, different programs. And so I'll try to prioritize the things that I know I need to get started on this summer when I have a little bit of time and other things that I've done before that I know I can push back a little bit. So it's really about managing your workload and how much music that you have to digest coming forward. And then we're always planning the next season coming up. So we're barely into the 26-27 season before we start planning 27-28. So it's always going.
I noticed though that you have these two positions and, you spoke of managing your time. It's not unusual, right, for conductors to have multiple gigs, correct?
That's right. I mean, they call them the jet setting conductors, and Maestro Miracle is one of them. He conducts all over the planet. In my case, I actually have three orchestras. In addition to Indianapolis and in New Orleans, I also am the artistic advisor for the Acadiana Symphony in Lafayette, Louisiana. So it's a nice
Yeah, I
size
saw
regional
that. I was
orchestra.
on my list of questions to ask, but tell us about that.
It's a terrific orchestra, great talent, but again, a regional orchestra that plays about 8, 9 weeks of concerts during the course of the season. And so, as an artistic advisor, I'm basically the music director, but I'm not conducting everything. So, I divide my time between those three cities, but then there's also the guest conducting that comes into play as, again, Maestro Miracle or so many conductors have. I'll be up in Rochester for 2 weeks this summer with the Philharmonic there. I'm in Michigan for a program next season, in Virginia this summer. So we get around. A lot of airline miles get accumulated, but the music world is very, very small. And I'll end up running into people that I've worked with, 10 years earlier. So it's all 1 degree separation, if not smaller, with classical musicians, it seems.
So you're used to juggling. Well, you just mentioned that you're working on the season, next year's season, correct? And does that mean for all three of these gigs that you have that you are balancing all these plates at the same time? You're doing different things at different times for each orchestra?
That's exactly how it feels on any given day, because you don't want one of those plates to come crashing down, to forget a contract that needed to be signed or a program that was due, far earlier, or budgets. I get very involved in budgets and numbers and what it's going to cost us to do this versus this. So I spend just as much time through email and on my cell phone as I do
Yeah, I
buried
was
in a
thinking
score.
that it's inevitable you're going to have administrative work too.
That's right. And you know what? The conductors that just do the guest conducting, you can make a living that way. It's a little bit more difficult, but you don't have any of the stress of, finance committee
Of
meetings,
course.
donor engagement. For example, I spend a lot of time with our patrons down here in New Orleans, particularly, but also in Indianapolis, talking to our board members. So there are a lot of things that make up the music director job, which is very different than the conductor job.
And I've come to know just within the last couple of weeks through coordinating, with ICO, to attend the concert, to arrange all this. I've gotten to know Dana a bit, and I'm
That's
really
right.
impressed with her. Uh, I'm impressed with her, and so I know that the most well-run arts organizations that has a lot to do with the leadership. And it seems like the two of you have an ideal one, and that you would you say that it's not uncommon for the managing director, the artistic director, in your case, music director, that their duties can overlap, correct?
In a healthy relationship, they should overlap. Now, I don't answer to Dana. She doesn't answer to me. We both answer to our board. And in a healthy relationship, the executive director is included in artistic discussions, and the music director should be included in finance discussions, so that we can work towards what's best for the orchestra, the vision, if you will. And that has allowed, in my case with Dana, our working relation, to imagine some very innovative and ambitious projects for the orchestra, like the Chevalier, which was a major undertaking to finance and to work with Madam Walker Theater. Then we have also had those collaborations with other organizations, and of course those semi-stage productions that we've mounted. So, if we have a concert every month, we want to make sure that concert is outstanding and hopefully life-affecting for our audience. So that's very important that we work and organize ourselves well in advance to make sure that everything, because if you don't have the money, you can't pay for it and you won't be around long. So it's all very important.
Let's take a break and listen to Matthew Kraemer conduct the ICO and Handel's Water Music a la Hornpipe.
So overall, how is the ICO positioned right now in terms of, I mean, has your project trajectory continued upward? And it seems to have since you came on board.
I would, of course, I'm very biased, but I will give that a resounding yes. I think that the progress and the growth, really, the better word is growth that we've had in these 11, almost 12 years has really been, it surprised me, honestly. I came in with a lot of ideas and it took time to implement them because we needed to raise the money. We needed our budget to support some of these ideas. And now, in addition to the collaborations, which I've talked with at length, and you've, witnessed in our most recent Chevalier, we're commissioning major composers. Stacy Garrup is a major composer that we premiered her work Chroma just back in April, rather back in March, an outstanding work. And she's a nationally recognized composer. Next season, we have a huge commission by James Lee III, who is having his music performed around the world with major orchestras. He's writing a chamber symphony for us, which will be premiered in Indianapolis and then performed in New Orleans and Lafayette, Louisiana. So, we would never have been able to dream these kind of projects before, but our education programs are growing exponentially. We have thousands more students attending at Clues Hall than we did even 4 years ago. The outdoor parks concerts are free to the community. So, our 7 subscription concerts remain the same, although the programming is much more robust. But the other initiatives that we're implementing are far more substantial. And of course, if we can raise the money, I'll dream up even bigger ideas. So, I'm not worried about running out of those ideas. I'm very happy with where the orchestra is heading. And, I would put our performance caliber up there with much larger orchestras than our size would indicate.
Well, you may or may not be aware that I'm also all the other hats I wear. I'm an arts administrator, or I have, and so I know a thing or two about fundraising. And I suspect that you're a pretty good fundraiser yourself, and that had a lot to do with where you are. Would you say that's fair?
You have to learn pretty quickly if it doesn't come
And
to
in
you
my
in yeah.
in my experience, it has to do with that relationship that we talked about, a managing director and the artistic director. When you're out in the community together, if you can give face time together, it's so important and also so effective. People want to see who's in charge here. And
Right.
I hear you, and you speak with such passion. I'm sure that's had a lot to do with your success over the years.
I appreciate that very much, Tom. You have to sell this vision, and it's very difficult to do if you don't believe in it. But I do
Yeah, and
believe that
I bet you all have a tremendous board too, would you say?
I'm grateful beyond measure for our board, which are some of the finest, most dedicated people that I've ever come to know in Indiana. And they believe fervently in the mission of the orchestra. They support it. They show up for concerts. They bring their friends in. They do such incredible work on behalf of the ICO. And
And
honestly, we couldn't.
usually not only the artistic director and the managing director, oftentimes it's a trio. Your board president, the three of you together. If that board president is strong, that's even more formidable, right?
Absolutely right. And we've been very fortunate to have a number of great board presidents that have come through.
Let's give a shout out to your current one. Who is it?
Tanya Dang is our current board chair, and she's been just a joy to work with. But she was on the board, several years prior to ascending. So we have a great succession of wonderful board presidents.
Inter, uh, Institutional knowledge.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So let's talk about next year's season.
Gladly. Again, those 7 subscription concerts are the foundation for our programming. And I always like to put programs together that contain some of the great classical treasures, as well as introducing our patrons to new music. So we start with a Mozart and Shakespeare program. I believe we call it Shakespeare and Love. Um, the program consists of the Mozart 20th Piano Concerto with Adam Golka, who was a laureate of the American Piano Awards, Mendelssohn's Midsummer Night's Dream Overture, Korngold's incidental music for Much Ado About Nothing. Korngold is one of my favorites. He was the film composer that really created that golden age of Hollywood sound. And then a work by an English composer, Gerald Finzi, his music for Love's Labor's Lost. So Mozart and Shakespeare. November's program is a shout out to America at 2:50, as we're all celebrating now. Excuse me, celebrating now 4 American works. The anchor work is Aaron Copland's beautiful ballet score, Appalachian Spring, the Barber Violin Concerto with violinist Melissa White, who's just superb. And then 2 living composers, Gabriela Lina Frank and her Concertino Cusqueño, and she just won a major award. And then a world premiere by a New Orleans-based composer, Tucker Fuller. December, Messiah, every year since I've gone here, conducted here, and it goes back many years prior to that. But we've stepped away from performing the full Messiah for close to 8 years, Tom. But we're going to come back and perform all of parts 1 and most of part 2 and part 3. So that's a staple for us. In January, this is a unique program because it's an arrangement of a masterwork, Gustav Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde, the Song of the Earth, which requires 2 singers. I say it's unique because that is a Mahler symphony that requires 85 to 90 musicians. But this is an arrangement by an English composer named Ian Farrington, and it works brilliantly. It's very, very intimate. Olga Perez Flora and Jamie Flora, husband and wife, are joining us as the singers on that with Schubert's Third Symphony. That world premiere I mentioned earlier happens in March with James Lee III and his Chamber Symphony. That'll be a big event for us. Anna Klein's Color Field, and then to cap it off, Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, which is my favorite out of all of them. And that's really hard to decide, but I love the Seventh. For almost 2 decades now, Tom, we've been doing a silent movie. And that's one of the most popular programs that we offer every year. This past year, it was the 1925 Ben-Hur. We did Gold Rush, Charlie Chaplin. But we're coming back to Buster Keaton, the other great comedic genius from the silent film era. And this is Steamboat Bill Jr., which I wasn't familiar with, but it's hilarious. We did The General, which is one of his famous movies, but this is terrific with a score by Carl Davis. So that's our silent film in April. And then again, we're always doing things a little bit differently. We're going to be back up at the Palladium, where we were 2 years ago for Michael Feinstein and the American Songbook. This time in May, we collaborate with Ben Folds, who is a very popular singer. So we're going to be up there at the Palladium to close our season. So that's a lot of different kinds of music.
That is such a rich programming.
2 world premieres, Ben Folds, the silent movie, and a lot of great living composers.
I saw Ben Folds years ago perform with the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, and I was not familiar with him. Wow.
I worked with him with the Buffalo Philharmonic probably 15 years ago, so he's been doing symphony shows for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But that collaboration with the Palladium, that was the first place that we played after COVID because Hamilton County had relaxed their regulations much more than Marion. So we played an American program up there, and we had a great time working with their administrative staff, worked with Michael Feinstein, as I mentioned. So we'll be up there.
Which concert did you do with Michael, by the way?
He was headlining. It was his annual concert that he does there.
What was his theme, though?
It was the American Songbook. We pulled repertoire out of the archives up there. Some of those great Nelson Riddle arrangements. We went into the archive, and Michael, nobody knows it better than him, but he headlined the whole show, and we were the backup band.
Tell me what your experience was with Michael, working with him.
Oh, he's, just a consummate musician, but also, that historian. He just loves to dive into the songbook. He's great in front with the microphone, just, emceeing the program, the historical anecdotes, the humor.
I always said that he would make a great college professor
if he ever steps away from the stage. Absolutely.
He could do it in his sleep. He's like, that. What I'm always amazed at, and he makes jokes about it, but if you didn't know him, you would think, what a name dropper. But he knows all these people.
He knows all these people. Liza Minnelli,
this is his life,
But his knowledge, as you mentioned, he's not only a great performer and he knows the songs, but he can connect them all. He knows who worked with who. Like you said, he just drops the names. in order to put
Well,
everything together.
and I say this in the most kidding way, but he really is a music nerd. And I love it. I guess I am too, because I'm just like, oh my God, I learned so much whenever he's on stage and he intros this music. You know, minutiae oftentimes, but he has these anecdotes about, well, talking to Ira about this or that and the other, or, again, with Liza or Rosemary Clooney and, all
Mhm.
of these Bing Crosby, you name it, he's met them at one time or another. But what the work he's doing up there, I will soon be covering the Songbook Academy. And but so you have an ongoing relationship with them. My question was, the ICO doesn't technically have a home, does it? A
Well, I would consider the
venue?
Schrott our home, and we used to be. I don't think
Oh,
we have the title anymore, but a professional orchestra in residence. But
okay.
that is our home. We started off at Clues back in the '90s, and then we were kind of homeless for a little while. We were down at the
Okay.
Historic Society, but when Clues was built, the Schrotts are major supporters of the ICO, and they attend our concert
And
when they're
that's
in
a
town.
perfect theater for you.
That's right.
That's a perfect theater for you. Could you have backed up the concert with Marianne Tobias and perhaps and Raymond Lepard at one time they did a concert together?
I'm almost positive that a number of our musicians were in that orchestra when they did
Okay.
that Raymond's, annual concert. And that was down at UIndy, if I believe. Uh,
Okay. All
and
right.
so,
Well, I know that I saw Marianne in concert somewhere, and I had to be the Schrock. But that's such an ideal venue, is it not, for a
it's perfect. Tom,
chamber?
the stage size is actually the same size as Clues, but it's the rest of the hall that really makes it so special. That the fact that the back wall is still so close to the stage that you're almost on top of the orchestra. The acoustics you can adjust with the curtains in the hall, and we have all the technology that we need in order to do musical theater. We did Kiss Me Kate in there, Trouble in Tahiti.
Oh,
So
Summer Stock Stage is now performing there. Are you familiar with them?
which is
Summer
why we're
Stock?
not performing in the Schrott anymore in May because they've taken that away from us. So we're homeless in May. But yes, no, they're terrific, and I'm happy for
Have
them.
you have you seen Emily's work?
Not in recent years, no, but no, I
Yeah.
have to make a trip up there when I'm in town in May.
Well, between the Songbook Academy and Emily Rustine Holloway, they are training the next generation of Broadway singers. So many people have come from those programs and are performing professionally all around the country. Covering the arts for as long as I have in Indianapolis, I believe my perspective is really unique, and I love this podcast because I get to brag on Indianapolis and to listeners around the country because fortunately now I've developed a listenership that's in, Chicago, New York, and well, internet,
Mhm.
there are people in Africa who hear this show, which I love.
Mhm.
We have analytics so we can pinpoint on maps where people are listening, whatever, on their computer. But I say all this because, your organization, ICO, is just one more feather in our cap. And I don't think that people here realize just the variety and the caliber of all these groups. I mean, the caliber of artistic activity here is very, very high from my point of view, because I've seen much of it, and I've been around long enough to see entire bodies of work of
Mhm.
people. But so, from your perspective, being now in Louisiana, I'm sure they would say the same thing about their market. But what do you tell people about Indianapolis? Because you do have a unique perspective because you get around.
And I'm from Indiana. I'm a Hoosier, and I'm very proud of that. Growing up in Richmond, Indiana, Indianapolis was always the cultural hub where I went for violin lessons, where I played in youth orchestra. Eventually, obviously, I went to Butler. I was very interested in maintaining my Indiana roots. And every time I come back now that I don't live there, I'm just thrilled with the growth. You see new buildings going up, you see business succeeding there, and the support for the city and its infrastructure. and the arts. We have a lot to be proud of, as you've already mentioned, whether it's DK or IRT, the symphony, the chamber orchestra, the opera, the symphonic choir. It's a wonderful place. And my wife and I miss it dearly, to be honest with you. Raising our boys there was a treasure. We enjoy our time here in New Orleans, but we're not from here, so it will never entirely feel like home. And I could do without the hurricanes and 110-degree weather on top of that. But Indiana is a very special place, and I'm very proud to have called it home for so long.
You just reminded me of something. What is it that you just mentioned? Oh yeah, yeah, you're from Richmond, so is Jack Everly. And he talks about his father
Yep.
owning a shoe store on the streets in Richmond, and he would stand at the door and he was very personable and whatever. And his parents would bring him into Indianapolis to see shows, but he has a warm spot in his heart for Richmond because, and he told the story he told on himself. He said in an interview I did with him, and he says, when I'm up on the podium, I have this persona. But he said, actually, I'm quite shy. But he said, when I'm up there on the podium, I just do my dad. Well, my dad who was like, never knew a stranger.
Yep. My parents knew Jack's father very well. We bought
Really?
shoes at the shoe store. Jack was most recently in town to celebrate the life of Ralph Burkhardt, who was the orchestra director when Jack was in school and when I was in school. So Ralph Burkhardt passed away a few years ago, but he was an incredible person. So Jack and I were both at that luncheon, and then you realize the number of musicians who actually did come from Richmond, Indiana. Ned Rorem, famous American composer, was born in Richmond. Matthew
Yeah.
Vaughn is a principal trombone of the Philadelphia Orchestra. There are a number of musicians in the ICO that have.
Well, there is a music tradition in Richmond, period. Let me be a history nerd. Are you familiar with Gannett Records?
The birthplace of recorded jazz. Yep.
So yeah, you brought up the fact that you have a family, so I want to get to know who Matthew Kraemer is. So tell me about your family, your
I appreciate
wife.
that. My wife, Megan, I met in Akron, Ohio, which was my first job. And we've been married now coming up on 18 years. And, she is the bedrock of our family. And I'm grateful to her for believing in me because, you start off a career as a conductor and it's a lot of hard times working your way up the ladder. But from Akron to Virginia to Buffalo, back to Indianapolis, and now to New Orleans, there are a lot of moves in there. And along the way, our son Gabriel was born in Buffalo. Nathan was born in Indianapolis. So now I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. New Orleans is home here, and I would have liked to think that as a conductor, as a violinist, that I'd have two boys who love music. But it's very painful for me to get my boys to practice piano every day, which they do. So they're more interested
Oh,
in
okay.
computers and
So
sports and those
they're
kinds of
budding
things.
pianists.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, we hope so. They're making progress, but no, they're
Is
wonderful,
your
wonderful
wife a
kids.
musician by any chance?
She's not. When I met her, she was training horses. She's an equestrian, but then got her degree in veterinary technology. She ran the foster care at the Erie County SPCA in Buffalo, and then when we moved to Indianapolis, she became a teaching assistant, which is what she's doing now at our boys' school here in New Orleans. So she's really adapted herself and her career around our many moves.
And tell me about the New Orleans or Louisiana art scene.
It's fascinating, as you can imagine. It's such an old city with such a legacy of music, food. The Louisiana Philharmonic has been around now, as I mentioned, since 1991. It's the oldest, I should say, musician-owned and collaboratively governed full-time orchestra in the country. We have 36 weeks of concerts, so it's a very busy schedule. And New Orleans is so fascinating because you could walk down any street in the French Quarter and you hear music coming out, whether it's
Yeah.
performers on the street busking, the Dixieland Jazz, which was the foundation of jazz here over 100 years ago. The food, it will wreck you if you're out eating every night. You're going to have to be on the Peloton for 60 minutes a day to make up for the gumbo, etouffee, and
Yeah.
beignets, which you'll consume. But there is a lot that's very unique and special about this place, the architecture, the history, obviously. So, it is like walking through a museum at times. I miss.
Have you ever walked through, just curious, have you ever spent any time just walking through the old Ninth Ward that was completely leveled and now is a ghost town? What's
I,
that like?
it's I don't think I appreciated the horror and the magnitude of Katrina until I got down here, so that you could actually go through those neighborhoods, and you'll still see plenty of Katrina houses in various neighborhoods, that where things have been restored completely, but then there's one house that's still, got the roof torn off of it. The Ninth Ward I have been through, and it's staggering to see what these the citizens here in the city went through. And most importantly, I don't think I understood what a levee was. And now they're all around. You can see them. They've been repaired or built by the Corps of Engineers. But to see and imagine what that would have been like when one of those failed. I mean, there's no off valve. The city filled up until the river or the lake rather the lake had leveled off. So just absolutely staggering. We celebrated, or I shouldn't say, we commemorated 20th anniversary of Katrina with Terrence Blanchard, who's a native born son here, and his Requiem for Katrina. And that was a very powerful experience
Oh, I
to
bet.
play his music with imagery from Katrina. He had his 90-year-old mom in the front row of the audience. So that is a lasting, and the city will never get over it, but that is a lasting imprint of something that had happened 20 years ago. And you'll still see pockets of it in various places.
And are you a sports fan? Are you a Saints fan?
I'm a Saints fan. I'm still a Colts fan. The problem with me, Tom, is that whenever I move to a city, the team is awful, and when I leave, it's really good. Buffalo was miserable when I lived there for 6 years. Now they're great. Indianapolis had a good spell. The Colts had a great spell. Obviously, the Pacers are doing great. I'm hopeful that the Saints will turn it around and the Pelicans will tier two. But I can tell you this: there's nothing like the Saints. The Superdome. It's a singular experience. The fans are rabid down here. They love their team, and it's a really cool experience to go to a Saints game.
And didn't they completely have to rebuild the dome after
Yeah, that's a
Katrina?
lot of really terrible stuff happened there during Katrina, and that was a refuge for people who couldn't get out of the city. And so
Yeah.
that's a symbol, I think, of resilience for the city, and particularly when Drew Brees and Sean Payton led him to a Super Bowl. That was, I mean, the what it did to the city was intangible. I mean, it was incredible.
Well, you know about his Purdue University Indiana connection, Drew Brees, right?
That's right.
Hope some of that Hoosier rubbed off on
It must
him.
have. Absolutely.
So what are your dreams for the Chamber Orchestra, Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra moving forward?
My dreams are that it becomes even more of a cultural jewel in the city of Indianapolis, that more people are aware of it, that more people attend concerts. I would love to see, the growth in our audience space, which is one area where I think we can continue to work hard, and we do. But I would love for us to continue the trajectory of commissioning new composers, of working with our arts partners in the city, with working with new arts partners as well. We've collaborated with the city of Indianapolis, the Sister Cities program. So many of our important societal organizations that help out. So I would love for us to continue to find new ways to reach the patrons and citizens of Indianapolis and to extend into central Indiana as well.
I'm going to ask you for a couple of pitches. What's your pitch to people who've never ever heard symphonic music?
Oh, let it in. You'll love it. And not everything will be for you, but you'll find something that you love, whether it's
Do they
because it's
need to be worried about how they look, what they're wearing, how they behave, what if they clap at the wrong time, all that stuff?
well, specifically if you clap between movements, I love that. It shows me that we have people who are new to the audience. But no, we're working very hard to address the issues that it's classical music is elitist. You can come in dressed however you like, frankly. We welcome young people into our concerts. It is a place where you can embrace the music in the mood that you're in. If you had a stressful day and you want to close your eyes and let the music wash over you, that's
Mhm.
perfectly appropriate. If you want to listen intimately because it's a piece everybody can experience the music on their own terms.
I have to ask this, but I have to say, and I'm not casting blame or anything on that, but I was disappointed that I didn't see more black faces at the concert,
Mhm.
Chevalier concert. I mean, I felt so much pride. for the community. When I was working in television, I did a lot of programming around Black history because there's no one else doing it. And I felt it was my responsibility, along with Latino messages, or voices, whatever. But was that a question of marketing, or was that a question of they haven't discovered you yet, or a little both? I mean, what was it? I mean, was it the
It's
Mountain Walker?
Of course, and it's an area which we worked for months to address. We worked in partnership with
Yeah.
the Madam Walker Theater, with Bill Barkley, who did advertising for us as well as our own advertising. And it's an area where we will continue to address the voices that have been underrepresented in classical music or the arts in general. Our wonderful artistic collaborator Joshua Thompson, who was
Well, of
responsible
course.
for Black Keys, which is a program we did 3 years ago, which won an Artie Award at the at through the city of Indianapolis. That was an incredible program. It sold out. We had incredible collaborators, and that was all Joshua's
Yeah.
brainchild. So, working with him has been integral. We work with the Links organization now 2 years in a row,
Well,
doing
you're
programs.
doing everything right. Like I said, I'm not casting blame. You
Of
did
course,
everything right. So
but it
that's
just
why
takes time, as you know, having done the work
that's
yourself.
why I want to talk about these things on this podcast. Make people aware. They may not be aware, or I don't think I certainly didn't feel that at your concert. I thought the tone was just, I mean, it was so welcoming, and that's what people need to feel like they're welcome,
That's right, and
That
we'll continue to do that
this
work.
isn't, we're not the other. That's for everyone. It's
Mhm.
democratic, and so that's my mantra, that's why I ask these questions. Do people have to worry about protocol and ritual and all that kind of stuff? Yeah. So, okay, what do you say to young people who are listening to this who have not yet discovered symphonic music or classical music in general?
I say it's all at your fingertips. Now, in this era, you can log on to Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music, and you can find all of this incredible music. And once you go down the rabbit hole, it's hard to come back out again. I find that there's so much amazing music. Symphonic music is 400 years of history, and you can go back further than that if you want. But symphonic music is really anything with orchestral instruments. We can play rock music. We do Broadway, ballet, opera,
Yeah.
country. I mean, anything. The Beatles had backup. Metallica had an orchestra backup. So, it's we really find our tastes and leave your mind open, to change your mind if you hear something that inspires you.
Well, that I think you just answered my next question. That was, what kind of music does Matthew Kramer like?
I'm always studying music, Tom. I love jazz. I love obviously classical. That goes without saying. Opera, but it's really what my wife is playing on our Alexa in the house, and we got a lot of Frank Sinatra, the Rat Pack playing. I love that era. She loves Michael Bublé, so I listen to a lot of different kinds of music. I'm not married to anything, but music is my life, so I spend a lot of time studying classical music.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, it's been an absolute delight getting to know you, and I look forward to next season. And I'm really going to try to, a lot of those concert you mentioned sound really, really appealing to me. So hopefully this podcast will be heard by folks who haven't discovered you. And I encourage all of our listeners, if they want more information, what's your website address?
icomusic.org, and then you can also find us obviously on all the socials as well.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much. And how's the weather down there? Is it humid yet?
Oh,
Down in New
it's
Orleans?
yeah, we're hit that part that time of year.
Did you notice I said New Orleans?
It's in New Orleans, and then nobody calls it NOLA down here, but it's not New Orleans. It's an Orleans parish. But no, this is not the time of year you want to come down to visit New Orleans. Come back in the fall when the festivals start. But Tom, thank you for all that you do for the arts in Indianapolis. We're all better off because of your advocacy.
Oh, thank you very much. It's my passion, and I'm a really lucky guy that I get to sit in theaters or concert halls a couple times a week, keeps me positive. And I think people should remember that. The arts, I mean, especially these days with all the noise, go to the theater, live performance, escape. Let yourself go and just immerse yourself. I mean, there's no better therapy, is there?
No, that's exactly it. I couldn't say it better myself. It's transformative.
Okay, Matthew, take care and hope to see you soon.
Appreciate you, Tom. Thanks so much.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
Let's close the program with Maestro Matthew Kraemer leading the ICO in music by Telemann. Our thanks go out to our media sponsor, Urban Times. Urban Times is a monthly news magazine which serves as the official newsletter for 15 Indianapolis neighborhoods, offering news about development, arts and entertainment, and from the business community. Thank you for joining me on the aisle. Please subscribe to my podcast, and if you want to hear previous episodes, find them on the All Indiana Podcast Network, or listen to them wherever you get your podcasts. This is Tom Alvarez.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, and make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Your day moves fast. Your news should too. That's why there's a new and improved Wish TV app, bringing you more local news, breaking alerts, live streaming, weather forecasts, radar, and Indiana sports, all in one place. Customize your news feed to see the stories that matter most to you and get the information you need when you need it. Download the new and improved Wish TV app today on iOS or Android and take News 8 with you everywhere.